What kind of cop were you before this?
Treasury agent, 8 years.
This would be your first actual murder scene.
Yeah.
I worked homicide before I went federal. This is what we'd call an orgy of evidence. Know how many orgies I had as a homicide cop, Gordon?
How many?
None.
Like you, be strong to hold the powers of the sun.
I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Listen to Pavarotti.
Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. Did you miss me? Well, I assure you, not doing a video yesterday did not impact my work on this case. And in this video, this is going to be a long one. It's going to be very detailed. You don't want to miss any second of this one, because this is the one where I bring it all together. And before I go any further, because I know good-hearted people out there want to stoke the fires of the nonsense about, people being unalived and brought back into the house and staging it. I think this one picture right here should shut all that up, and let's get down to business. That's right. When I say let's get down to business, I mean let's get down to business. Noticing in my comment section here recently, I've seen people say things like, well, yeah, you were wrong on the roommates. You backpedaled on that. You backpedaled on the AK. I have never backpedaled on the AK. It is quite clear that what put this thing into motion, and I've said it in a million videos a million times, started with the Fetty Bros, finished up with the Aryan family getting with the Aryan Knights to do the hit. There was just a few pieces in there that I was needing to put together to finish this, and I've got them. And I'm going to be bringing them to you in this video. But I'm going to do this video in a different way, because now that I have had a chance to look at 1112 video, go through, determine where the discrepancy was in the body cam footage of the Banfield stop, and look at all the court docs related to this issue that's been released and the reports from the MPD that were very valuable in me coming to these determinations. In this video, I'm going to go through each individual aspect that I feel like is key. We're going to break those down, but then at the end, I'm going to do it in little parts, and I'm going to do it all in this video, Lord willing. If I can get it all done, I'll have it out to you this evening. And if I do, I will do it as a premiere, and I will be in the comment section. So I know a lot of people were mad that I wasn't in the comment section of the premiere the other day. I did that so that y'all could actually talk to each other. But when I get this one done, I'll be in the comment section, because this is going to be the expose on the Idaho 4 crime itself. I'm going to give you all the evidence, knowing in advance what I've started out with here. With the Aryan Knights, the Aryan family, those are the presiding factors in this case. Those are the ones that called it. I believe there was at least one of them, if not two, involved in the actual crime. But there was also inexperienced people involved in the crime as well. And we'll talk about that. But I'm going to put it all together for you in this one. And then in the last segment, I'm going to wrap the entire Idaho 4 case in a bow. So you might want to hold on to your seats unless you want to extend your body out the roof of your house. Let's roll. Now, first of all, I'm going to call it all out around each particular subject that we're going to be taking clues from before we put together the final picture of this at the end. And it starts with the autopsies. And it needs to be noted that the defense began asking for things like this around February 22nd, 2024. And I cross-referenced it with the notes on the Franks. And when you go to this, and you'll see that on Thursday, February 22nd, 2024, I received an email from Detective Sergeant Gilbertson containing 2 scanned documents. These documents were notes taken by Idaho State Police Detective Tollison during the autopsies of the 4 victims in this case. I attached the scanned documents to this case file. When you go to the notes on Franks and the exhibit list, the defense specifically points to, and we never got to hear it in the open discussion in the court, in the hearing, but they specifically point to notes that were taken by Tollison on these particular autopsy results. And I find that interesting. So we know when the defense was digging into this, number one. But let me show you the real egregious parts, first of all, as it relates to the Kohberger case, because you can see then on February 22nd, 2024, Danny Vargas narrative, X-rays of victims. On February 22nd, I received a thumb drive from coroner Kathy Mabbitt, which contained X-rays of Chapin, Kernodle, Mogan, and Gonzalez at the Spokane coroner's office during the autopsies. I booked the thumb drive into MPD evidence. Here's why this is so key. Because when we go to the next court document, or the next MPD document, Danny Vargas then on February 27th, 2024, narrative, X-rays shared via OneDrive from Spokane Medical Examiner's Office. On February 27th, I downloaded the X-rays for Gonzalez, Mogas, Chapin, and Kernodle, which were shared via OneDrive from LA at Spokane County Medical Examiner's Office to Ashley Jennings, Latah County Prosecutor's Office. I copied the X-rays to a DVD and booked them in the DVD into MPD evidence. I had previously booked in a thumb drive with images provided to me by Kathy Mabbitt. The images were thumbnails of the actual image. So this is showing you a timeline of events, and guess when this evidence of the autopsy results finally get to Ashley Jennings? February 27th, 2024. 2024. Now, you got to understand, folks, here's how it works. The evidence comes first to the prosecutor's office before it can be disclosed to the defense team in discovery. So that means that Ashley Jennings didn't even get the autopsy reports until February of 2024 to even have the opportunity to get them to the defense. Now, how is the defense going to have a speedy trial in 2023 and they can't even get the autopsy results from the actual victims until 2024? You think this is a case that's on the level? Give me a break. But that's not what we're focusing in on in this one. What we're focusing in on in this one is what the autopsy results actually show and the egregiousness of what they don't show due to incompetence or frankly, intentional mishandling of evidence. And I will show you that. Now, although we have never seen the actual autopsy report, which we probably never will because they're making statements in the public explaining why they wouldn't want to do that. So I doubt we'll ever see the real autopsy. But what they did was give us abbreviated autopsy reports that described the damage done to Xana and to Kaylee. They didn't give us the results describing all the damage done to Maddie and Ethan. They just list the death blows, which I feel like is there's probably things in there that they don't want us to know, but we're going to take an unbiased look at the results that they did give us and tell us what it tells us and see what it tells us. So what I want you to try to do as we go through these results is I'm going to show you some things that I feel like are critical, but we're going to do it in an unbiased way. Try to clear your mind of everything you know about this case before we go into these results of damage of the victims. And let's just see what the actual results tell us. What can we infer from them looking at it without being biased? Ready? Let's go. Okay, first of all, this is a report from November 21st, 2022 by Danny Vargas. And its narrative is Spokane County Medical Examiner referring to autopsies. On November 16th, 3 days after the unalivings at approximately 7:45, Latah County Coroner Kathy Mabbitt and I, and when it says "and I," that means Kathy Mabbitt and Danny Vargas, attended the 4 autopsies for Xana, Ethan, Maddie, and Kaylee. at the Spokane County Medical Examiner's office, blank in Spokane, Washington. The 4 autopsies were all performed by Dr. V.S. Gary Tollison, a detective with ISP, observed 3 of the autopsies, Kernodle, Mogan, and Gonzalez, as he arrived after the autopsy for Chapin was performed. What I find interesting is in none of this is a mention of Officer Gunderson. Now, if you go back to the Franks motion, you'll see that Ann Taylor was pointing specifically to Gunderson being present in the autopsies. So him not being listed in this report must have been one of the things that she had noticed was omitted from these reports. But that's another subject. We're going to focus in on the actual findings. Now, they take a lot of samples and swabs. We're not going to get into any of this gross stuff. They take prints, and we're going to get down here to where they actually focus in on the injuries of the victims and see what we can ascertain from this. It starts with Maddie's fatal injuries. Maddie's fatal injuries included a left lung laceration and a liver laceration. Madison only had sharp force injuries. That means that Maddie was not beaten. Maddie was not hit with anything. Her injuries only included sharp force injuries, which means she was only stabbed. And her injuries included a left lung and a liver laceration. That does not mean that's the only injuries that she suffered. They're not telling us how many times she was stabbed, because once you start adding up stab wounds on all these victims and it ends up being too high of a number, well, then you know more than one assailant was actually committing these injuries. But I think it's very important to notice that since Maddie only had sharp force injuries and she was unalived specifically due to lung and liver lacerations, what does that tell you? That tells you that the person who tells me that the person who unalived Maddie was very experienced in what they did. They were experienced. They went straight for the kill shots, which was the lung and the liver lacerations, which means they had knowledge of where to stab somebody to unalive them. And I think you'll notice that as we go through, it seems that the unaliving shots are very particular on the victims when you really look at what's going on. But when we get to Kaylee Gonzalez's fatal injuries included a left lung laceration. Now we're seeing some commonalities. A liver laceration. So the fatal injuries that were attacked on Maddie also included what happened to Kaylee. However, Kaylee also suffered 2 subdural bleeds, which means a subdural bleed means you penetrate the skull into the subdural portion of the brain. They call it a subdural hematoma, and she had 2 of them. Let me show you. This is going to get graphic, because to get a subdural hematoma, that means that there was a blade that must have penetrated the skull into the subdural area of the brain. Now remember, the only thing that they're discussing here are injuries that are fatal injuries. So every one of these injuries that they're discussing on Kaylee would have been a fatal injury. That includes a left lung and liver laceration. Those were fatal on their own. 2 subdural bleeds. That would have been fatal on its own. A stab behind her clavicle, which cut her subclavian vein and artery. Those would have been fatal on their own. And I've pointed this out before. When you're stabbed behind your clavicle, that means you're stabbed in your back. So you couldn't be laying on a bed and be stabbed behind your clavicle. Kaylee had signs of sharp force injuries as well, but also asphyxial injuries. Asphyxial injuries, we've already discussed, coincide with being gagged. And blunt force injuries. Kaylee had 20 plus stab wounds. The blunt force injuries, though, were caused by a different weapon. Don't let anybody fool you and tell you it was the butt of a knife, because that has already been debunked. And we have a paper trail on how that was debunked from the detectives telling us who to go to for the real answer and the person who gave us the real answer. And it lets us know that 2 different weapons were used during this event.
In the documents that just became public, there was a preliminary autopsy report that said she was stabbed over 20 times. Mr. Gonsalves said, and we haven't seen the final autopsy, but he has said she was stabbed, Kaylee, over 30 times. Do you know the amount of times she was stabbed?
We do. We know the exact amount of times that every one of them was stabbed. And it's not something that we would speak about for the privacy of the families. But I can tell you we've met with families, and his information that he has is very accurate.
Well, we know because of the public documents her face was unrecognizable. And then the concept of, okay, a second weapon. Where do you stand on that to set the record straight?
Yeah, we believe that there was one primary weapon. The same knife was used to kill all 4. As has been reported, and I think the family has spoke to this, Kaylee was struck in the face, and we don't know what caused the marks that were left by it. It wasn't fatal, and we just don't know what caused that. And we've never located, obviously, the knife that we know did kill all 4, and we don't know what was used to do that.
Now, a fist can be a deadly weapon.
Right.
The injuries to the face, could that have simply been from a hand on her face?
No.
So you believe the injuries to her face came from something other than his fist?
Yes, I think the fist could have been part of it, but it certainly appears something else struck her to cause the marks that we saw that is not consistent with a fist.
What about marks near her mouth that came out? I believe they came out in public documents. Bound?
Yep.
Gagged?
And those are what I'm referencing, and no, it doesn't appear, there was no evidence that she was bound or gagged.
Are the marks from a knife?
No. No.
So the reality is the extent of what was done to her may be a mystery forever.
Yeah, it may be. And his information that he has is very accurate.
Rounded with stripes?
Yeah, it was a rounded object that had stripes, so it bruised her with stripes around her mouth.
So when you look at the results of this, you have 2 subdural hematomas to the brain. You have a precision strike behind Kaylee to the subclavian artery. You have precision strikes on both Kaylee and Maddie to the lung and liver. However, you have a clear second weapon used to beat Kaylee around her facial area and cause fractures, as well as many additional stab wounds, many more that we know of than Maddie. What does all of this tell us? And we're told that this crime happened almost simultaneously between when Maddie and Kaylee were attacked. What does unbiased look at all this say? It tells us not only was this obviously 2 assailants, but it was obviously 2 assailants with 2 different experience levels and 2 different temperaments. One assailant is not going to strategically and decisively unalive one victim with precise blows and then lose their cool and attack another victim in a completely different manner with a completely different level of rage. It tells us that there were two attackers, one very experienced and very calm, the other inexperienced and with a very different temperament. It also tells us that the experienced assailant assisted with the other assailant with the final death blows. That is what an unbiased look at the evidence tells you. So there is no doubt there was not just one assailant that attacked Kaylee and Maddie, but there were two weapons and two temperaments and two experience levels from the two assailants. And that is what the unbiased look at the evidence tells us, and that is what the defense's expert also ascertained from that evidence. Like the judge said in his order on vague and undisclosed expert testimony, Mr. Turvey, who was the defense's crime scene expert, has opined in his report that two assailants were involved in the unaliving, partially because he believes multiple weapons were used against Kaylee Gonzalez. Inferred in his opinion is that one person would not have had the time or ability to use multiple weapons in the time frame alleged when faced with two victims. So he looked at the unbiased results and he came to the same conclusion. However, when we look at the autopsy results for Ethan and Xana, we see two cases that, although there are some similarities, there are some things that are glaringly different. And when we see that Ethan's fatal injury was from a stab wound under his left clavicle, which severed his subclavian vein and subclavian artery, and also his jugular vein, all in one stab wound. And it was all severed during that one stab wound. Ethan only had sharp force injuries. We know he had additional injuries to his legs. Xana Kernodle's fatal injuries were from one laceration in her right lung and two lacerations in her heart, which once again are precise injuries that caused her fatal injuries. However, Kernodle had 50 plus stab wounds, mostly defensive, but Xana only had sharp force injuries. So, what does all of this tell us? It tells us that the precise strikes to Ethan was done by somebody with experience and a calm temperament. However, the strikes to Xana were caused by two precise strikes, one to her right lung and two to her heart. And she also had 50 plus stab wounds that were mostly defensive. Xana only had sharp force injuries. So there was not a second weapon used on Xana. Yet there are clearly two different assailants with two different temperaments committing the attacks. And what would 50 plus stab wounds, mostly defensive, tell us about the attack on Xana? It would tell us that Xana fought this attacker furiously. And with 50 plus defensive stab wounds, that tells us that the attacker on Xana was not as strong as the person that attacked the other victims. This would have been a weaker person. And this 50 plus stab wound attack, mostly defensive, would have likely taken some time. That means that the person that attacked Ethan would have either had to have attacked Ethan first and disabled him before attacking Xana, or both of these attacks happened at the same time. What this tells me is the person that was attacking Xana was a weaker person, such as a female, and Xana was able to fight her off while another attacker committed the fatal blows on Ethan in a swift manner. And then once that attacker was done, he went and delivered the fatal blows to Xana. And when you look at the totality of the evidence in this case, I believe everything is going to line up exactly like I just explained. And what that tells me, and what it told the defense expert as well, is both Ethan and Xana were attacked at the same time, and then the person that attacked Ethan assisted the person that was attacking Xana and delivering the final blows. But it also tells me with 50 plus defensive stab wounds that the first person attacking Xana was likely weaker and therefore likely a female. And these are different attackers that attacked both Kaylee and Maddie because there was no other second weapon used. So that means there are 4 assailants, one of them likely female, in my humble opinion. And Ethan was likely awake when this happened as well. And I'll show you evidence to prove everything I just said. And once again, defendant disclosed expert opinions from Brent Turvey that more than one assailant was necessary to accomplish the crime in the time frame alleged. Specifically, he asserts that there is direct and indirect evidence that attempts were made by the suspects to clean up the crime scene after the unalivings. When you see a lot of the pictures that are circulating now, not the one I showed you, but the other ones that are circulating, you've got to understand that you're not going to see a lot of evidence outside the direct crimes because there were attempts made by the suspects to clean the crime scene after the unalivings, which would have taken far longer than the time interval alleged by the state. But also, there were multiple weapons used against Kaylee, and Xana and Ethan appeared to have been attacked at the same time. Those results came back just like we looked at it with an unbiased look, and it tells us exactly what it told the defense expert in this case. Now, is there any other evidence that suggests 2 assailants attacking Ethan and Xana at the same time, and Ethan being awake? I think there is. Because when you take Dylan's first statement directly after the crime, you get a clearer picture in what she actually said. She said she heard a male voice say, "You're gonna be fine. I'm gonna help you." Dylan said she did not recognize the male's voice. So when you go to the first statement Dylan made of "you're gonna be fine, I'm gonna help you," and then you cross-reference it with what she said in her second statement. Her second statement said she could hear Xana crying in the bathroom, which obviously wasn't the case. She heard her crying in the bedroom as the female assailant was attacking her. But then Dylan said she then heard a man's voice say, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." And it got watered down with this statement. But she follows it with, Dylan said it was weird because the statement was not in a nice way. And the voice was one she had never heard before. The statement was not in a nice way. So when you hear, "You're going to be fine, I'm going to help you," not in a nice way, that is the experienced attacker telling the inexperienced female attacker in a not very nice way, "You're going to be fine, I'm going to help you." That is what an unbiased look at the evidence shows. And the likelihood of Ethan and Xana both being awake during this incident is very high, in my opinion. And when I say high, I mean H-I high, according to Bethany, because in her third interview when she was in Reno, Nevada, the officer asked Bethany about the drug use in the house and who used. Bethany told me Ethan and Xana both took Adderall when they drank alcohol. Bethany told me she saw Ethan and Xana both use Adderall the night before the unalivings. Bethany told me she saw Ethan take a pill and saw Xana crush up a pill and snort it by using a rolled up bill in her room. Bethany also said she thought Kaylee also used Adderall, but was not sure. So the night of the unalivings, Ethan's taking Adderall, Xana's sniffing it up her nose. You can bet they're both still wide awake when this atrocity takes place. Now, if there's 4 assailants, you would think there would be more than one knife. And the blood transfer between victim to victim would either confirm or dispel more than one knife, among other evidence. Let's see if that happened. Now, on November 16, 2022, at approximately 19:55 hours, I drove from Spokane Medical Examiner's office to the FBI office located in Coeur d'Alene. Met with Special Agent Bryant Gunderson. Several of the clothing items collected during the autopsies were still wet, needed to dry in the evidence dryers overnight, and they go on to explain how everything dried. And remember, all of these swabs that they took during the autopsy that would show the evidence transfer of the blood from victim to victim, therefore determining if more than one weapon was used, was collected during this time as well as all the other evidence. And they transported the remainder of the evidence items back to MPD and placed them into the evidence fridge in the MPD evidence room. Why wouldn't they have taken it to the Idaho State Police lab for testing? On November 17th, I drove to the FBI office located in Coeur d'Alene, met with Special Agent Gunderson, removed the dry items from the dryer, and along with the items I turned over to Special Agent Gunderson on 11/16, I collected 2 additional items from Gunderson, and those were 2 additional items. But then Gunderson released the items back to me on 11/17 at approximately 11:28 hours, keeping that chain of custody. I transported these items back to MPD. On November 17th, 2022, I worked with TS, the MPD evidence technician, and booked all items collected in the autopsies into MPD evidence. Where do they put them all? In the evidence fridge in the MPD evidence room. So that's where that evidence should have been collected instead of going to the ISP lab, right? Well, except for one thing. Now, strangely enough, I can't find where any of the items that were sent to MPD evidence was then sent to the ISP lab. It seems like the main thing sent to ISP lab was just the knife sheath with the touch DNA on it. But as we look at this, and this is the narrative around the evidence refrigerator, number 203, located at MPD, where they sent all of that swab evidence that would have confirmed more than one weapon. On Friday, January 24th, at approximately 750 hours, I arrived at the Moscow Police Department to start my shift. When I reached my door, I could hear an electronic beeping noise. Upon entering, I determined the noise was an alarm sounding from the evidence refrigerator unit. The digital temperature display reached 60 degrees Fahrenheit when I left work the day before, Thursday, January 23rd at 1200 hours. There was no alarm sounding. The evidence freezer, which is a separate unit, was not affected. I immediately contacted my supervisor, Captain Hathaway. Captain Hathaway recommended I transfer the items stored in this refrigerator to our secure outbuilding where other evidence is kept due to lower temperatures outside. No refrigerator in the building just due to lower temperatures outside. I turned off the heating units inside this storage area. Oh, this storage area not only didn't have a refrigeration unit just because the temperatures were lower outside, but it also had heating units in there, and they were apparently on until they turned them off, and opened the large garage door to allow the inside temperature to drop quickly. This is a scientific method for lowering the temperature. You open the garage door. The outside temperature was freezing that morning, and within 10 minutes, the inside temperature dropped below 50 degrees. And how did you determine that? Which is the lowest number on the thermostat? Oh, that's how you determined it, because that's as low as the thermostat goes. All items were transferred by 8 o'clock. At approximately 1230 hours on the same day, Captain Hathaway brought a new 20 cubic foot refrigerator to the outbuilding, which he plugged in and set the temperature. An hour or so later, I checked the temperature of this fridge. Thermostat read 40 degrees. I then transferred the items to this refrigerator. But what were those items? I mean, oh, dang it. It was all the blood swabs blood swabs, blood sample card, DNA card. Oh, all the hair taken from the victims, the nail clipping. It was all of the evidence taken from the autopsy report that was stored in that dadgum refrigerator that broke one night and destroyed it all. So I guess we'll just have to guess if the same unaliving weapon transferred blood from victim to victim. Now that's the end of part one. Part one, I just wanted to unbiasedly establish the fact that there were 4 assailants in this crime. I have broken down everything in all of the documents now, the released video footage, and everything we already knew. And now I have a working theory of everything that happened in this case. And yes, if you want to know why this happened, go watch my first 500 videos. That'll tell you why this happened and who is ultimately responsible. And when I say the Aryan family and the Aryan Knights, I say that because when you think about who's ultimately responsible for this thing, and you go and you look at how cases are worked when it comes to major cases, who always is the top person that is charged with a case? And that is the boss that called the crime. Go to any mafia case. They always go after the Don, even though the Don never got his hands dirty. That's what we're looking at in this case. But when you take the totality of everything involved, I'm going to blow your mind at the end of this series. This first part was just establishing the fact that there is likely 4 assailants, one of them female, involved in this crime. The way I'm going to do this series, though, is going to be different. Every single episode that I attach to this, I'm going to leave the first part and the last part. I'm going to leave it all in this video. A lot of people say, well, you can't, it's hard to even figure out your videos, Pavarotti, because they don't go in order. This one's not going to be hard because I'm going to continue to attach it every single video to the video so that when I'm done with this series, it'll all be one video. So you'll notice these videos getting longer and longer and things you've already seen. Well, that's done for a reason, because at the end of this series, you will no longer have any questions about the Idaho 4, I assure you. Please like and subscribe to this channel, post your comments, thoughts, criticisms, and until next time, Pavarotti's out.
There's a quote usually attributed to the writer Mark Twain that goes, "A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes." Funny thing about that, there's reason to doubt that Mark Twain ever said this at all, thus ironically proving the point. And today the quote, whoever said it, is truer than ever before.
Now, we just learned in part one about the likely 4 assailants, at least, and one of them likely being female. In this part 2, we're going to show you the operation, because this was most certainly an operation. And I'm going to show you the events that started this operation. These events started as far back as at 3:45, right before you see the DoorDash driver drive into the neighborhood. These events continued on until things started to happen around 3:50 when the DoorDash driver likely parked. And then more events happened at 3:51 when the DoorDash driver walks up the road and uses her flashlight to signal somebody. And then another event happens after that, where a certain individual that we've looked at forever apparently signals somebody that was sitting in a car. And then you'll see that car leave out of the neighborhood. We're going to identify what color that car was with a police report and what type of vehicle it was. And then understanding that the Banfield body cam was exactly 1 hour, 7 minutes, and 26 seconds off, we can then see that vehicle coming down the road at the exact time you would expect it to, show with evidence exactly when and where it parked, and then we'll see the 4 assailants running behind the Banfield body cam cops, where they would have been picked up by that same vehicle and then seen driving away from the scene. We're going to show you all of it, and it is very obvious, and I'm right on this. Hold on to your hat. This all starts right here at 3:44 and 45 seconds with gun rack guy getting out of a vehicle, not an apartment, but a vehicle, and racking his gun. Next, just a little after 3:45, we hear the same gun rack guy on his cell phone conversing with who I firmly believe now was either the DoorDash driver or whoever was with her. Did you see that? As soon as he finished the phone call with who I believe was the DoorDash driver, you see the first flashlight signal to who I believe is their actual getaway driver being made. Look again. Then, not so coincidentally, less than 20 seconds after that phone conversation and that flashlight signal to the getaway driver, which I assure you that's what it was, and I'll prove it, the DoorDash driver, not so coincidentally, then enters the neighborhood less than 20 seconds later. Then the DoorDash driver, as you've seen in the window, pulls past the King Road residence, turns up the road in between King and Queen, and we can only assume that they parked behind the King Road residence. They may have parked right next to the Linda Lane apartments at first. We don't know. But here's what we do know. What happens directly after that? And it's strange that it's just the amount of time that we estimated for the DoorDash driver to sit there for a few minutes before walking to where we see her walking. Okay, so as you just seen there, gun rack guy leaving the parking lot of the Queen Road Apartments and walking to at least the entrance of the Queen Road Apartments. I believe he stopped right there because less than a minute later is when we see the DoorDash driver walking up the road. Now, what you just witnessed the DoorDash driver do there is not look for the King Road address to deliver her DoorDash order, like the mainstream morons would want you to believe. And she certainly was not going to signal people in the house, all the phantom people that lame brains seem to think are hiding behind trash cans and in that house across the street. No, what she did was walk to the end, look to make sure the coast was clear, and then the key thing that happened was when she turned around and flashed her flashlight to a specific area, which would have been a vehicle located at the top of the hill in front of the Queen Road apartments that will be driving away shortly. And something else happens after that. But what you're seeing is her walk to right here, make sure the coast is clear before turning around and flashing a light at a vehicle that is parked right here at 3:51:52 exactly. Watch again. So look at the clock, be very aware of it. Now we see her walking up. At 3:51 and 35 seconds is when the camera starts. She stops. She checks to make sure the coast is clear. Then she turns around and signals the person that's on the hill in the car right here at 3:51:52. I didn't catch this till I got the missing evidence I needed from the 1112 camera. But you can see less than 16 seconds after the DoorDash's flash right here, that was a signal from Gun Rack Guy to the getaway driver. Here it is again, slowed down. Right there. You see the flash? That was the signal. 3:52:06. Now that signal went to the actual getaway driver, letting them know that it was go time. And then we can hear that vehicle start to rev up, and then we see it pull away just seconds later and out of the King Road neighborhood, and it will return in just a little bit, I assure you. There's the signal. Now listen close for the sound of the vehicle. Door shut. Hear it turning around. Yep, now it's starting to drive off, 3:52:36. So we hear it starting to turn around and drive off at 3:52:36. And remember, the vehicle has to be in this area to be caught in the third story window of this house. Let's check the time of it. Remember 3:52:36. Where is the lights in the window up here? Right there, 3:52:57, just like we would expect. And then the actual getaway driver is leaving the neighborhood, as you see right here. This is going to be a tan sport utility vehicle. We find out later when they pick up the assailants. Now, we know when go time was because we have this receipt for when the DoorDash driver delivered the Jack in the Box to 1122 King Road on 11/13, and it was done at exactly 3:59:00, just like their receipt says. So if they delivered the Jack in the Box at 3:59:00, and we know that vehicle didn't pull in front of the King Road residence as it was delivering the Jack in the Box, because we have the video of it driving straight past it, that means that the DoorDash driver delivered the Jack in the Box, walked back up to their car, and then drove out of there about a minute and 15 seconds later. And that was go time, folks. So according to the receipt, the DoorDash delivery was made right now at 3:59:00. And then she would have been making her way back up to the vehicle. And we know exactly what time she gets in the vehicle because of the lights on the house over here. And the first light you're going to see is the vehicle that drives past the house, so don't get them confused. And let me show you the difference. There will be a vehicle coming up that will shine lights on this house. Where is it at? She's still walking back right there. That's the vehicle coming up the road right there. Don't get them confused. And then there it goes, and there it goes past. But now we're going to see right there, that's the DoorDash's lights coming on her vehicle. And then it's going to go off as she turns, and then you'll see the lights in the window a few seconds later right here as they clearly come around and do not stop. And then they conveniently drive out of the neighborhood, which gives them 20 seconds to get out of there before they should have appeared on the Banfield cops body cam. Yeah, right. Here's the vehicle passing the Banfield cops right there at 3:12 and 16 seconds. Now, what you just seen was the same tan sport utility that left the area of the King Road at 3:53, the getaway driver they signaled before the atrocity. It passes the Banfield cops right here, and then it would have pulled right in here to pick up the 4 runners, which are the 4 assailants. And remember, 3:12:16 body cam footage time is what time in actual time? 4:19 and 32 seconds. Then, when we see right here at exactly, keep watching, keep watching, keep watching. We know we got 4 assailants, one of them being a female from the autopsy. There they go, right there at 3:12 and 38 seconds, which is 4:20 and 2 seconds actual time. Then at 4:20, you see the headlights pull into that driveway off of this building, just like we would expect. And they don't go off until 4:20 and 20 seconds. And then we see just a minute or so later, after they've collected the 4 runners, the same tan sport utility that started it all is going to drive away with the 4 runners in it right there. 3:14 and 18 seconds, which is 4:21:44 actual time. And now we have this case solved, and no, it wasn't any frat boys. $359.00, just like their receipt says. Now, once you know, you know. And I'm begging you, please don't come into my comment section with all that frat boy and Jack D stuff, because some other lame brains out there have called out some stuff that doesn't make any sense. I just showed you what happened. It's irrefutable. And this is just the start. This series is going to continue until I have completed the entire scenario of the Idaho 4, because I've got it now. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Post your comments, thoughts, criticisms, and you won't believe what's coming next. Pavarotti's out.